Here we are, going live. And we're live, right? I think. Happy day. Happy day to you. Thank you for joining me. We're going to talk about something. I was speaking with a friend today, and so if she sees this, I appreciate her inspiring me to talk about this deeply, and just give the sort of my my current position on I say current position because these things seem to shift a little bit. There are different teachers that have different perspectives on this particular topic. So first, I guess we'll just jump right into it. I'll run through my stuff as always, and then if we have time for Q&A or chit chat at the end, we'll do that too. Thank you again. So just throw it in the chat, and we'll get to it. So first things first. Right when we're born, we already have karmic imprinting done, right? So we already have a bunch of stuff that we sort of believe, basically, at a soul level. We have a bunch of stuff already. Then we experience events and observations. Either something hurts us, we perceive being hurt, or we're just observing others and then adopting what we see as like kind of the way to live, right? It seems that people do this thing and people seem to like this thing, so I'll do this thing. Like those types of things. Behaviors, but we also do it with thought patterning. We start to actually pick up the sort of way people think. We'll notice that in many ways we think similarly to how our parents did, or whoever we were close with. Whoever we looked up to as well, we start to think a lot like they do. We are chameleon sort of in nature that way. We blend into the energy that's around us as best we can so that we can feel comfortable. Generally, humans do that, but also highly sensitive people do that, especially because basically if they cause tumultuous or if they seem to cause tension in the environment, then that's going to make their sensitivities worse, basically. So it makes everything more of a nightmare. They tend to be oriented to trying to make sure things don't become nightmares. part of the wounding, sort of an empathic or sensitive being, sort of stems from that. This like people are generally agitated with themselves, and then they take it out on everyone around them. That's generally what humans do, honestly. And so when we were growing up in those environments, we get a bunch of these wounds, and they actually develop from initially the very most minor thing creates the wound, the very initial tear in our self-image and confidence in ourselves. That's where it first comes from. It'll be something simple, very simple, like we can't reach a toy and we can't walk yet, and we're trying to get our mom's attention and they ignore us because they're busy. Something like that creates wounds. It's like inevitable that we're being wounded in this environment because of the perception in duality of separation. So we form these wounds no matter what. Perfect parents are wounding their children constantly, totally accidentally, right? Of course, some parents do better jobs than others, right? So all of that stuff happens. And then as we awaken, it becomes really important that we understand the very prime thing that is occurring in the universe every moment, the prime motivation for consciousness to even be awake. It's a very simple cycle that's happening constantly in consciousness, and it's the universe saying to itself, who am I? And then perceiving something, experiencing. Who am I? I am this or that. So for example, just like I'll put it in terms with my life because it's easier for me. So maybe I'm with my children. I'm having a moment with them. It's like it's loving and peaceful. There's nothing going on that's bad. It's just a good moment with my kids. The universe, it's sort of saying, who am I? And the universe echoes back with, I'm a loving and peaceful parent, enjoying time with my children. So this is sort of the human framing of things. when it's in that identity role of parent, it's like it embodies it as a character, right? And it's these characteristics. As the spirit invests more into the frame, and this will make more sense in a little bit why I'm talking about this. But as spirit invests the identity more through cleansing and purification, and this balancing process, which is the healing balancing process, that's what integration really is this process. So the answer shifts then to something that's more like, who am I? I am here. We are experiencing love and peace. Our forms vary, yet we all hum together in vibrational resonance. So there's no more separatist type thoughts or role-based thoughts. Or they've lessened a lot. And that's when we are, essentially, we're in that frame, we're kind of holding a kind of Christed purview of that moment, because we're not even really seeing the people in the moment. We're seeing the spirit of the moment, consciousness, fractals, forms of consciousness loving each other, right? So what does this all have to do with healing? So this is why when the universe asks itself, who am I? And we respond, I'm hurt, I'm in pain, I'm lacking, I'm in fear, I don't have this, I don't have that. We are identifying an area that we are seeking healing in, basically, right? And this is happening constantly, moment to moment, all the time. Very, very like autonomously, it's happening. And we start to become conscious participants of kind of what the soul is learning, instead of what just the human was like learning about the environment. Now we're learning on a spiritual level because we've awakened and now we care. And that's what's causing us to want to transcend some of these things and evolve and remember the wholeness that we kind of know. We know it's there, but like it seems like it's not there, right? It's a bit of a paradox that's happening in that integration, the process where we're bringing heaven to earth, but bringing spirit into the body, basically, right? Same thing. And in that process, there becomes a lot of confusion because spirit perceives in a vastly different way than we see with our eyes. And so it becomes this whole balancing process. Because the reason I like the word balancing, and really balancing and healing is one and the same thing. It's the same process. The reason I like the word balancing is because balancing doesn't imply that there's a wound. Balancing allows us to notice that we're talking about perceived and narrative-based wounds that truly didn't harm me the way that they seemed to have harmed me in the past. It allows us to depolarize the wound, right? It allows it to feel a little better when we'll start to notice that when we're thinking of healing, it's sort of like reminding us that we're not whole, isn't it? Right? Whereas balancing, I'm whole, I'm off kilter. I'm confused, right? I'm just a little confused here. Much, much nicer, I think. Much, much gentler way. However, there's a part of the ego that likes to hang on to the idea that I'm a victim. That I'm a victim to my circumstances, reality, God, whatever it is. And this part of us is a sticky beast. Very much likes to anchor in and grab hold of something to blame. And if I suggest that I'm not wounded, then it means that I was not the victim. That's the identity aspect that we're letting go of in the healing. So in the healing or in the balancing, really what we're doing is we're trying to respond to ourselves with a more accurate reflection of what we are, what we know ourselves as. That's what the healing accomplishes. So as we come to know ourselves as divinely perfect beings, then the universe says, who am I? and I am as God created me. That's it. What's going on, right? Look at this magic, right? The purification process to get to that state is what we call healing. So we could talk about it like the healing or nurturing part of it is the love-based feminine energy or divine mother energy, Holy Spirit. I think Shakti might be a good word for it, but peaceful, loving, nurturing energy. But then the other side of it that's more balancing is wisdom and kind of thought-based. It's about bringing love and nurturing wisdom, though, right? So it's balancing those two. This is why we work so hard on balancing our divine masculine, divine feminine, and trying to figure out how to get these fires in us in harmony so that our spirit is kindling itself properly and not cycling out of harmony with itself. And so we want to apply both to any of these types of healings. And we heal ourselves, sort of. For any healing to occur, this is important as well, for any healing to occur at all, what is to be healed has to be known by the self. So this knowing, though, it could be unconscious, or it could be conscious for the human awareness. So the person might not be aware of what needs to be healed, but may still experience healing, which was agreed to under the veil or outside of the veiling of their conscious awareness. So if they'd have more of a connection with the soul site and more integration, they'd probably just be aware of what needed healing and more complacent or complicit maybe in the decision making, you could say. So there's a veil happening, and there's an illusion, it's actually delusion of control that the human feels it has, it thinks it has. The human thinks it has free will, but it's not that way. It's the spirit that has the will of God and then directs it into where the soul is, and the human and the lower three chakras distort that into something weird, and that's when we miscreate stuff. We've distorted God's will, and that's happened usually at the soul level because the soul is also learning. At the human level, we're not really learning, we're patterning and conditioning, and we're trying to pattern and condition our human in a good way, an aligned way. It's really the soul and spirit that are learning through us. Not technically the spirit. The spirit's like, the Holy Spirit is the aspect of God. So it's the energy of God or the source spark of God that invests into us. So that part is not really needing to learn, but it through us understands what it is through its own perception, if that makes sense. And it only sees the perfection of the soul, its child. So it doesn't see like miscreation. It doesn't judge or, it sort of is more just like, I'm here when you're ready for me. Whatever you're doing is great. You're my beautiful child, right? That kind of thing. So we can get more aware of the opportunities for healing, but all healing then is done by God or the light within, source, divinity, whatever we want to say. People don't heal each other, technically speaking. People are conduits of healing that the Creator accomplishes. And the self essentially opens to the healing. The one to receive healing opens to the healing. Healing can't be like thrust upon anyone that way. There are a whole bunch of different interesting illusions that were set up to show really magnificent healers. Basically to open people's eyes to miracles is why some of these things occurred. And the problem with that stuff is that usually those types of people end up getting corrupted. They end up getting sucked into something when they're doing lots of miracles and become quite, authoritative in the miracle business, you could say. often they stray away from the path. It's one of the reasons on this channel that I kind of am worried about, like, I don't want to get too popular. And it might even sound weird to presume I'll get popular or something. I don't. I just so no healing can occur at all without this power of God or the light. It's the only thing that can happen that isn't of God, that can sometimes look like healing, is the illusion of technological advancements. But it's an illusion of that. So, or in medicine, like, to get an idea of what that approach leads to, I would recommend just investigating for yourself the grays and the zeta reticuli. Essentially, they're us. Those are actually human beings. I don't know if you guys knew that. And they used technology so much and so much hybridization and stuff like that, that they lost their kind of connection to divinity and lost their emotional body and different things like that. And that's why they're here now. Actually went back to try to fix that. And this is the timeline that we're actually on right now. Like, we are them in the past, right? And we could go that way. And so that's why I always try to remind, like, all healing happens through divinity. It doesn't happen through whatever things we're putting in our body or technologies we're using. That's all just part of an illusion. And if we idolize the technology as the healer, then we basically dismiss the organic process of evolution with spirit. And we do that through our, we just end up limiting ourselves a lot by trying to participate in that stuff. And that doesn't mean we don't, like, maybe do stuff to improve our situations. Like, if we have a headache and we feel an aspirin might help us, I'm not saying don't take it. I'm saying that remind yourself that this is an illusion, that actually what's happening is I'm taking this, God is allowing God is aiding me to help this in this little illusion that I'm playing. That truly, I would just have to recognize my perfection, and that would alleviate any suffering. It's okay that I'm not there, but I'm going to take the aspirin or whatever thing it is, right? This stream is sponsored by I'm just joking. But and so in steps, it works in probably 4 general stages or categories that we need to look at and understand how we respond to. We're all a little different with this. So what I'm trying to do is give a bigger picture, higher view, bird's eye view of what occurs in the healing process, and how to best reflect on a particular moment, without getting too lost in the pain of it all. That makes sense. So first, the stimuli occurs. This is like circumstances, externally or inward, like feelings come up, something occurs in consciousness. The stimuli, it stimulates you in some way to observe something, feel something, whatever. If there is emotional wavering of any kind, elation or depression in emotion, elation into anger, or depression into like a fury, or it depends how you feel anger. I don't know. Everyone's a little different. But any emotional wavering from the circumstance or the stimuli essentially indicates an attachment with the external world, or that type of stimuli if it was internal, right? So like a good one to have is like, when I connect with God, I feel great about it. That's a great one to have, right? That's a great catalyst. It's a great stimuli. There's no issues there. But if we have stimuli like this man says something a little degrading perhaps to his wife, just in our vicinity, right? A little degrading, and it really it brings something up in me, right? Because he's being disgusting with that little comment. He's showing like how he sees her and stuff, and it's gross, and there's people around, and it's not fair to her, and right, and all of that might come up, and that these things come up because we're looking at not the way we would handle it. We're looking at our shadow. We're looking at the part of us that would treat someone like that for some reason. We're looking at that, and that's the shadow, because we've abandoned a bunch of our aspects of ourselves. We're infinite, right? So anything we look at that we are like, that I couldn't ever conceive of ever being that, but you are that though. You are that though. So that's what the balancing process is we observe stimuli, we experience a catalyst, a rockiness of emotion of some kind. If there's no emotion, we haven't had catalyst, which means there's no lesson. Emotion indicates lesson. And when I say emotion, it's challenging to understand and speak about, but emotion and feelings, or emotion is sort of opinion on our feelings and what we're observing generally. But the feeling of love in a moment is not emotional. That makes sense. And I'm sure a lot of us have had that experience of just pure love. It's not emotional, really. It's just amazing. It's just love. It's just great. It's not a certain flavor of stuff. It's all of it, right? So if we get emotional, like if we think, oh my God, this is so amazing that this just happened, it's just so amazing, it indicates that we're kind of just attached here. It doesn't mean it's a bad attachment necessarily. It's just something for us to notice. It's better to feel great about everything, reflecting perfection in the universe, than it is to be upset about things for our overall like advancement. But we have to be okay when we're upset too. Like wherever we are, we have to try to be okay with. You know, something that's really important, I don't know if I say it enough on the channel, but know thyself. In 2 words, that is the summary of your purpose, because to know thyself will automatically cause the self to heal, which inspires all ascension and evolution. So all you're doing is knowing yourself. It just depends on whether or not you're aware of that. And we're realizing, oh, it's all sort of a lesson. It's all lessons and stuff for me to know myself. That's all this is. And myself being God, and my relationship with God is myself. It's not externalized or anything. It's all here right inside of me. And so then I couldn't actually be wounded, which is why like I said, I don't like to call it healing, to call it balancing. It's less polarized that way. But after the catalyst, we use 2 general energies to then heal. One is love. This is the divine feminine energy, or the mother, divine mother. This allows us to nurture ourselves, hold space for the other person, not get judgmental, because just the love is there, right? At whatever degree we can muster for the situation. And that's where the balancing comes in with wisdom, which is the divine masculine energy, or light, truth. There's the truth of love, feminine, and the truth of light, which is wisdom, masculine. So if the masculine aspect of us is not like aware of where the confusion is, like not really aware of it, then the nurturing love can't get into the areas that are distorted, because the areas that are distorted are under the radar right now. That's generally how it works. Now, there are certainly different situations that arise, but generally speaking, the masculine has to become aware of the thing to bring the truth of God to it, in order to open up a conduit so that the love of the mother, or the feminine, can pour into that and clean it all up, heal it. That's how the healing happens. You have to know what it is first. So that's why on the channel, I'm always talking about how like it's fine that we're all kind of nuts. Like it's great. Yeah, we're nuts, all of us a little bit. Great. You know, like just own it, you know? That's why I say that, because when we own that, it just becomes more apparent to us. We're not resisting the ways that we're lying to ourselves. We're not deceiving ourselves about our own deceptions of ourselves. We see more of what we're doing to actually influence ourselves in a negative way. Self-sabotage. We start to realize that actually almost all of the negative stuff that I did or that happened to me was like partly a result of like me still being there and participating, like, and you know, like for example, in a relationship, like maybe I was treated really poorly over and over and over and over and over and over, and then eventually it got to the worst extreme. Like I stayed for all that too, right? Like I'm a component to all of that whole story. And people have done some horrible things. So like I've had, my life experience has been not, like I've had some rough stuff go on. So that's all I'll say. But we balance that love and wisdom, and we go back and forth. This is why we revisit things, because literally we have to dig a bit at it with the wisdom side. The masculine side kind of digs into the thing a bit to understand it. And then the love gets poured into it at the amount that can be done at that time. And then we cycle back to it usually. So the more open we can look at it without getting all wrapped up in the emotional part of it, like the more we can be okay, emotionally stable during seeing stuff that bugs us. Like it bugs us, but we're emotionally stable. The reason it bugs us, but we're emotionally stable, is because we know and can see through what's going on. We see that the unreality and the falsity, fear and stuff that's operating here, we know that it's not true. Therefore, love can just fly into it because it's seen through. The illusion's gone. Maya's fallen apart here. And we'll start to have moments, more and more moments, of not even really noticing anything. Like you'll probably have times where you're just kind of chilling and you'll realize, oh, I haven't thought about anything in a little while. I don't know. Time went away for a moment. We'll start to have those types of things the more clean we are, because there isn't like garbage just on repeat in our egoic mind. That all happens through this investigation process. But when we have like spiritual teachers talking about how wounded everyone is and how we have to heal everything and it's all broken and like it's a never-ending soul recovery journey, like, no, we don't have to frame it these ways. We don't have to frame it these ways. We are a dynamic fluid, complex being that's navigating reality that shifts moment to moment. And I'm not wounded. I just don't know what the fuck is going on. That's it. I'm not wounded. I'm fine. I'm great. This place is messed up. And I'm learning that I was nuts, right? That's what's happening. No one's wounded, right? So, and like I said, that holding that position is not always easy. But hi Debbie, thank you for joining. And hi Dan, hi lovelies. Dan's a hip cat. So we're doing that process constantly, every moment, revisiting and revisiting and revisiting. And those with anxious minds will know that like deeply. And that's why anxiety is so annoying, because it's the masculine mind that without any further insight is just going over the same thing again, right? Again and again, repeating it. And it's so annoying that part of us, I have that in me, that gets stuck on a thing and just have it just kind of run around. It's It's something I don't have too much anymore, but it was a thing that was really annoying for me in the past. And so the balancing and healing is like already done. Yet it does seem ostensibly, in my experience, that there's still stuff to do, right? I'm not done yet. So this paradox sort of resolves itself over time as the integration happens, and the wounds start to just be dreams, but they become exalted, essentially sort of forgotten. The wounds get risen up, 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 up. And when we visit those memories, we don't feel like cringy at it. It doesn't feel like difficult. That's how we know we've healed it. So if we want to be proactive in our healing, we can literally sit down and take a minute and go, how do I feel in my totality? What things about my childhood were the most challenging? Like, start asking ourselves these questions, or invite someone. A good way to do it is to find a friend who wants to just ask you a bunch of questions. That's a good way for this to come out more naturally, because we have to seek for the answers to these questions that we're being asked by the people that are curious about us. And because we have a desire to please them as well, we end up pulling out a little more usually. That's why it's a little more effective usually when it's two people, because we're getting excited. We're like, oh, you get to talk about me, and oh, I want to give them all of it if we feel safe, right? And that's why it's so effective. Therapists that help people feel safe when they're sharing these things, they can heal it all if they can correct the belief. And that's what the balancing does. Balancing corrects the belief. So this happens in the archetypal mind in balancing, and then also in emotional balancing. Like, we're kind of doing both simultaneously. We're balancing the heart and the mind, kind of. You could think of it that way. We want them to be in coherence and in agreement with each other, in alignment as much as possible. Letting the heart usually make the decisions is what I would advocate for, because the brain just doesn't know what's going on. It just doesn't. I used to be the opposite way. I used to be a thinker that thought that if I know the answer, that's the answer, that's it, right? Like, I used to be kind of like that, very mind-oriented. And that's why I think I'm a person that's good for talking about this, is because I'm able to intellectualize this stuff, but generally I try to follow my heart with everything. I don't think on the channel I talk about following the heart enough, really, and the following love instead of fear. But we follow fear because of these belief structures. And so as we're balancing the archetypal mind, maybe we'll go through like just an example, like for myself, just because it's easier for me to come up with these examples if I'm putting it in my own perspectives. So let's say that, first of all, when I'm talking about the archetypal mind, I'm talking about the discipline of the personality, which the most accurate depiction of that personality in the archetypes that I've seen is the major major arcana in the tarot, the original ones, probably like the Rider-Waite. Those are probably the original depictions of our archetypal mind. And so you can imagine that we're in any moment we're embracing one of those roles, or a melding of roles to do things in our day, right? So let's pretend I'm the Hierophant or something, the teacher or whatever. And we can use different systems to review these archetypes. It doesn't really matter, but what we're essentially noticing is that when I'm the teacher, here's my experience. So I'm the teacher, let's say, and I'll ask the universe, who am I? And then I'll say, I am someone who, teaches and talks a lot, and I have things that I'm talking about, and people hear them or they don't hear them, and there's not a lot of meaning or value in what I say. Perhaps this might be something that I'm lacking in. I have a distortion or a shadow This is all hypothetical and stuff that I have dealt with, I guess. Yeah, I have. So, like, I have had those feelings. So, it's sort of like having these understandings that I'm in the teacher role, but I have like these lack pieces of it, like pieces of my teacher actor character are not very, they don't have very good self-esteem. As far as how he wants to teach, he's all he thinks about is trying to be aligned and pure with God and truth. But as far as what he thinks of his offerings, they're not very valuable, let's say. So in his experience, we'll start to see the lack of value, like maybe either. So in my case, when I was going through this, people are pretty complimentary and nice and good to me about the content I make. There are a bunch of wacky things that get said to me as well, but it is far less than the amount of complimentary and awesome things that are said. But there was a time where like I couldn't properly receive or appreciate that I have given something to someone, like Sean has delivered something that someone liked and they really liked it, and it's good for me to be aware that I helped, right? Like to receive that. So that was a healing that I had to do, or a balancing. And so we're just correcting these nuanced little beliefs about how we see ourselves in our varied roles. And as we do that roll to roll to roll to roll throughout our days, starting to like almost identify like, what role am I right now? What persona am I running right now? And what do I feel about that persona? And where is that? Like, if we can dedicate some of our consciousness to these queries of ourselves, we'll, I think, really skyrocket our awareness. Because if we can do that in a way where we're not getting upset with ourselves and pissy that we're doing it, like it should be, we want to make it kind of fun. This stuff is the stuff that leads to the peace of a clean mind, a mind that doesn't talk shit about itself, basically, nearly as much. So yeah, so I'm going to jump into the questions now. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. You guys are awesome. Dan says, any idea why the level of human suffering exists? Because it obviously exists in its own parameters. Do all souls need to suffer in this way? Why did I sign up for this? Just why? That's a challenging question. Why did I sign up for this? The general reason that souls are birthed into a lower state of slower vibrational light is due to innocent ignorance, basically. I think I've talked about it before, but it's this thought of, I wonder if I was separate from God. I wonder if. But that impetus is a natural impetus that happens when the soul is being birthed. So that's why I believe that the densities of consciousness are much like grades of school, and that we cycle through them. And then we do it again. And so many of us have went up, and then we have so much compassion for the beings that are still further down, that we go back. A lot of us have done that. So the why is, why would I do this to myself? The interesting thing about this question is that God couldn't do this to you. And when we're thinking, how could I do this to myself? It implies that our ego did it to it. But that ego identity self is it's not real, right? So an extreme level, as bad as you can imagine. Yeah. So the worst stuff that we can imagine those are probably some of the hardest things, because when we're looking at those things, it seems almost like we're denying the evil or something. But it's more like don't you have a sense that it could actually be worse? It could be actually a lot worse. Don't you have that sense? I certainly have a sense that it could be so much worse than it is. So because it's one consciousness, it's our conscious, like me and you, Dan. It's ours, right? That is the hard, one of the, I've always talked about on the channel, the hardest thing in this evolution of consciousness or awakening process is the true observation of self, which has to include the entire planet's consciousness as one son of God is where we confront these things. So people generally want to blame an external entity for it. There's certainly thought manipulation, war stuff happening, but the humans are doing it. It's the human consciousness. It's the human will that's doing it all, right? It's the consciousness sphere here of the invested human spirits, really just the Son of God doing all of this miscreation. So it's us doing it. Not literally Sean, of course, but it's us doing it. It's us doing all of it all the time. The consciousness obviously has to appear separate for the matrix or Maya or the illusion of separation to exist. Hope that person's okay. But that why did we sign up for this? And do all souls need to suffer in this way? The suffering itself, after the forgetting of it or after the healing of it, it doesn't exist anymore. So it's the same. I like to try to share, it's the same thing as like waking up from a nightmare. It's like, whoa, that was weird. And it was spooky in the nightmare, right? Maybe. But after, it's like, it's gone now. So I don't obviously condone any of the insanity. That's why I'm always saying this world is nuts. Like, it is nuts here. Yeah, totally. That's why there's so many volunteers here as well. It's because of how nuts it is. Basically. And you know, at least for me, I'll just say I got to a place where insanity, like you're not going to explain it really. Like, the more insane it is, it's just more, it's just insane. It's just more crazy. It's like you can't, but who signed up for it and why? I think I would ask these questions of your soul, you know, that's how I would kind of position it. I would ask myself in meditation in trying to get into a heart-centered place, why is this place this way? And you'll see that there's various layerings of karmic lessening that's happening on the sphere. The sphere itself is learning and growing as an entity. And we are all learning and growing, and some of this stuff, like if we didn't do it or see it in our consciousness, like we wouldn't stop it. Like it would just, you know, we wouldn't grow up, basically. That's why it's coming out and we're seeing it, and it's becoming It's becoming just we're not able to not see how crazy it all is. Universal Spec says, keeping the heart open and letting us interact with everything through it instead of shutting it to the illusion that it keeps us safe is super expensive on this journey. Yeah, I think it's like what fuel do we have? Right? Like what can we afford? That's what I like to advocate for, is sort of what can we afford with our stuff. Do what we can. Keeping the heart open in, it depends. I'm kind of a weird person. Like I enjoy trying to, I get excited when people get agitated with me. Part of me gets really excited because I'm like, oh, a test. And I'm like, okay, all right, I'm going to love the shit out of them. But that's sort of like, I sort of can see it coming. I see what's happening. Oh, we're going to do a thing. Okay. Yep. It's very serious. Very serious. We are in a human serious thing. But inside I'm just like, that's sort of how I am now. And so, and I can't hide it that well either. Like I have to try to pretend, but, it's opening that heart up into those experiences. It comes from an understanding that it can't really affect us. It actually can't really hurt us at all. Truly. No matter what it is, no matter how ridiculous it is and crazy it is, they could have machetes. Doesn't hurt us. It's not. It doesn't. And so from that safe space, the heart doesn't have to like close down. Doesn't have to hide or retreat or do any of that. And that's why I always try to advocate for the humor kind of approach of the fun and isn't this funny? Isn't this funny that this place is so wacky? Oh, what a wacky place this is. I mean, I've looked at it all the other ways, and if it can't be just absurd and a little comical that it's so nuts that consciousness itself is doing all of this stuff here, then it's gonna be really frustrating. Oh, Sarah. Hi, Sarah. You can't incarnate here and not take on the woes of the world. It's part of what makes it so hard to be here. Yeah, that's exactly it. Like you can't incarnate here and then not go through the veil. I think if you do an Immaculate Conception and some of the female mysteries, I think that in those they are already pierced the veil when they're born. The Marys and the Queens and the High Priestesses of old would do this in their mysteries, the female mysteries. And so I think that maybe they could see through the veil then, but no, yeah, we all come in through the veil, get confused, and we take on all of this stuff as well. And it's a lot of stuff, because I don't know if I've told you guys or not. I think it's referenced in the Law of One, but Maldek and Mars had fights and things happened. Maldek exploded. It's the asteroid belt. Those souls all came here to re-experience and begin new cyclings, working out that karma. So, essentially they blew themselves up, I think, a couple times. So there's a lot of polarity karma shit going on here, like ancient stuff happening. And we're cleaning it, and we're all cleaning it together, but we do it in different ways. So you can imagine our individual expressions, we encounter this opposing force to us, the adversary, and they're this enemy of ours, and we're like, blah, 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 blah. But then we heal it and we forgive it, and then maybe we don't talk to them, but it's over. That's healing that sort of conflicting separation-based karma. Like you could think of all of this separation karma as like this big pool of shit. And so we're all cleaning it in different ways. But it all interrelates to itself karmically through the soul's stories as it's incarnate in all these other places, and so it's a giant pool sort of. Yeah. Dan says, sorry, you're the only person who might have a slight clue. But the level. Oh, no, don't apologize. No, you ask a great question. It's a great question. I don't actually have a clue. So I hope you guys don't think I have a clue. I don't really. But I appreciate what you're saying. No, I think I have had that same thought probably a billion times. Why would I ever do this? Why would anyone do this? What is this? What the frig's going on? I get it. I get it so well. Hello, Full Metal Autism. I love your name, by the way. Love your name, Stupid 3D World. I think Maldek gets mentioned much earlier by Edgar Casey. I don't know what Edgar Casey said about Maldek. Yeah, probably. Like it would be in the Akash. Edgar Casey is a rootin' tootin' cowboy in the Akash. He's the gold medal holder for the Akashic records, I would say, in humans, at least in our current recorded history. So whatever he says about Maldek, go with him. Yeah, for sure. I'm just saying what I'm privy to, what I've sort of seen. Some of the beings are incarnate into what we think of as Sasquatches. Actually, they're living here now. They're here now. But I don't know where they are though. But they're around. Funny. How a lot of these like weird things that we saw are true. And also, what's his face? Aleister Crowley. When he was towards the end of his life, he wanted to do all these things and get all these things done. And he talked about summoning all the demons and like, he lived, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, but he lived like beside Loch Ness, and there was a monster in there, and maybe it was a demon, and I think a lot of this stuff is like totally real. Sarah says the same circuits in the brain are responsible for both pain and pleasure. Yep, liking one and denouncing the other is like a form of separation. Carolyn Elliott wrote a book called Existential Kink Talking about getting off in your pain. Wow. I knew that because I don't know if you remember, but I was talking about how all emotion is love. So it's interpreted as good by the ego. The ego likes all of it. So it doesn't care really what's going on. All it wants is for you to get riled up emotionally, basically. It doesn't really care. And then also the pain and the pleasure are, you'll notice, like, if you sit in, and I don't advise people do this, but I'm an odd person, kind of experimental in ways. If you dive into physical pain a lot, you'll realize that it feels the same as an orgasm. It feels the same. The only difference is the belief and the structures, the mind structures around the concept of what's happening when I orgasm. But try it. I'm not going to tell you how I made myself feel pain, but you'll notice it if you really go into the pain. It's like it's pleasurable. It's actually pleasurable. Yeah. And it's all emotional pain is sort of the same as in my experience anyway, just what I've seen. the ego just feeds off of all of it. It just loves all of it. It doesn't really care if you're disturbed emotionally, you know. However, it also seems to want to step in the way of too much positive emotion. It seems to be hijacked, is the term I feel, from a synthetic frequency. I've talked about this before, but there's synthetic frequencies that I think are here that are messing with that aspect of our consciousness. It's just like a radio blast, you could say, you know. Consciously play alchemist and transmute, exactly. I agree, but catching that which was separated long time ago and feel it in order to integrate it back into the being is super hard. Right. Okay, I think I understand what you're saying. That's the trick. The trick is to realize it wasn't separated. The aspect that seemed separated was our own fabrication of an illusion, sort of. Like, it's almost as if, like, we've taken a box and we're like, okay, I'm going to put a part of myself in this box, hide it under my bed. Then I'm going to go, it's not under my bed. I forget it's under my bed. I don't know where it is, but it's just under the bed, right? It's like we've played this little game with ourselves, is the best way to look at it. So the soul fragments, we're not seeking to, it's literally just a matter of perspective. We're not seeking to recover anything. We're just literally naturally remembering who we are. That's all it is. We're just remembering who we are naturally. It's not about recovering the brokenness, healing the brokenness of us. It's about expanding what wholeness is. We are whole, we become more whole, right? Does that make sense? We're getting bigger, getting more. We're not healing anything. We're not lacking. We're just growing, expanding. Sarah says, yeah, Aleister Crowley did that. Yeah, I thought so. I heard Led Zeppelin recorded the houses of the holy in that house to harness the energy. I like to hear energy. It was probably made with lightning. But yeah. I'm not surprised. That's amazing. And actually, in like a lot of those metal bands and like really popular rock bands, there was a lot of that type of thing. Going to different energy places, and probably that house is probably a vortex, probably some type of meridian. Probably wasn't some fool, you know, like he would have put his property somewhere important. He would have or created it himself. You know, people make fun of him a bit, I think, but he was not a fool, you know. And I think it's interesting, but there's so many of those weird things with bands and stuff, and kind of some of it's a little creepy, honestly. Gets easier and is a form of death. Also reforming ourselves. Yeah, reforming ourselves. Full Metal Autism says, at least that's what I'm being told I have to do to heal the trauma. Yeah, so there are like stages, right? So there's a period of time where we are in the wound, like we are hurt. It's obvious. There's no like ifs, ands, or buts about it. Someone's done something shitty, it hurt us, or we did something shitty and now we're hurt. Like it's hurt, we're hurt. It sucks. But what I'm saying is that the healing aspect of it is when we move past that, we eventually come to terms with, yes, it seems like I was hurt. It does. I feel hurt about it, but ultimately I don't gain from wallowing in any victim mentalities from this. Ultimately, I have to move on from it. Because what other like positive way am I going to move forward with it other than moving on, letting it go? So then when we start to let it go, then we start to exalt the memory. We start to heal through love and wisdom. We start to clean that up. So it has different layers, right? And I'm sure there are things that happen to you that when it first happened, you were really mad and then you let it go. Like there's probably things you can actually think of. Oh yeah, I used to be mad about this or that. Like one time there was this kid and he threw a rock at me. It made me really mad. And then I attacked him and we had a little fight. We were like 10 or something, but I remember these things, and like what I recommend is trying to go through all of those little memories and feel into them. Like what was going on. That kid's name, I think, also was Sean. And it was an interesting little moment because generally I never got physical. But in this case, I was like actually attacking this kid. And he just threw a rock near me. Didn't even hit me. He could have argued that he was just throwing rocks around. But here I just lost my mind. Anyway, I don't know why I'm talking about that. Sarah says, I think it's just observing the feelings, all of them, and not judge them. Not go into the mind and tell ourselves how awful this experience is, just zooming out and being curious, a sense of awe. Yeah, yes. Yeah, a sense of awe, curious. Yeah, and it seems almost like, if I'm honest about my authentic experience of reality, people will think I'm a fucking asshole. They will think I'm an asshole. Because essentially most people are just kind of being, weird. They're just being weird and kind of dumb. And my internal dialogue is more, look at all these lovely, strange people doing all these strange things, these souls, and I'm like, they're awake, but they're not. What is going on? It's very strange. Very strange. What are we doing? What are we all doing? And they seem to want to like walk around a store and like look at food for feeding themselves and things, and that gets a little odd. And even that I have to eat is a little odd for me. But that's because I personally, in my growth, struggled with lifting up into the higher chakras and not grounding as much, right? So like even things like sometimes eating got confusing for me. Like what could I eat? What does that mean? Right? Like literally not understanding what I'm supposed to eat. Like I've had those types of experiences, like eat, okay, right? But so I've kind of been all over the place, which is why I think I'm good for talking about these things, because I've gone all over with the experience. Dan says they cut heads off chickens there, supposedly. Grief, the lowest vibration, but the doorway to heart. Dan says, I cry every day, not sure if love or loss, sort of a mixture. I cry every single day, multiple times. Multiple times. Sometimes it's still processing held cellular or auric emotion that's needing to get processed that doesn't even have to do with anything. Most of it is stuff that's still held in me from having to leave my wife and come out of being with my children all the time. The emotional investment in all of that stuff is so deep that there's like a well that I'm sort of slowly emptying, you could say. That's going on. So crying all the time for me, like I cry all the time. Sometimes it's never sad. It's never like I'm sad, so I'm going to cry. It's always just I'm feeling so much that I have to cry. It's not a bad thing. The emotions aren't judged that way for me. So, purging, yeah. I bet, Sarah says, I bet many more musicians are cultists knowingly imbuing their music spells to make them extra catchy and timeless. Yes, Avenged Sevenfold comes to mind for that. And also there's another one. There's a whole bunch of them. I don't know if they know or not. I don't know if they know or not. I want to talk to them and ask them, like, do you know what you're saying? Do you get it? Or am I just like seeing things here? Because blowing my friggin' mind. But I think music in general is one of God's languages, we could say, right? So it makes sense that God would speak through, and that the instrument or the artist themselves may not totally get what they're doing. They may have no idea, right? It's a big mystery. Dan, you might be purging. Tears are salt water and are cleansing. Eventually it gets to the point where you couldn't cry if you wanted to, and you might start laughing. Yeah, that too. I think for me, most of my tears now, I still have tears, but they're like usually sort of happy kind of tears. They're sort of like, even I can even have tears at like something being super sexy. I can cry at how sexy it is. So I'm crying often. Often I'm crying. Like so often that my children have jokes about how much daddy cries. Cuz they'll make me a picture and I'll be like, "Oh my god. Oh, you beautiful children." I'm not that dramatic about it, but I'm kind of like that. I try to hide it. I'll be like looking at my daughter drew me like a crayon thing, and I'm looking at it, my eyes, I start crying, but I'm like trying to pretend that I'm not. So yeah, I do that all the time, and I think a lot of it happens with purging, where it doesn't necessarily feel that great, but you'll feel lighter usually after, probably. Universal Spec says people tiptoe around each other too much, hide in their phone, etc. Yeah. If people paid attention to each other, they'd be able to see themselves. So they don't want to. So if I can hide my consciousness away from looking and being into whatever I'm engaged with, then I don't have to look at myself, right? I can just look at Facebook or whatever. Hey, E. Sean, if I remember correctly, E says, I think you said you had a bad day sometime last week. Were you able to apply these spiritual perspective in that situation? Yeah. I do this all the time. I'm actually really, if someone was grading me, I'd be doing fucking good, because I don't, I literally perceive any time I get emotional in any way, I'm immediately all over it, trying to figure out what just happened. And so I don't handle everything perfectly, of course. I don't. But what I do very well is my attentiveness into the lesson and into the learning of it. So, yeah, I think you're talking about, I had a bad day. One of the bad days was, I think my kids were getting picked up or something. Or I thought they normally are picked up by my mom after school. And just so happened this one day she couldn't, and I didn't know that. And so I got all very upset, and it, of course, I don't expect her to have to do it, or it wasn't like that. It was just, I didn't know what was going on. But in that situation, yeah, it was all out of balance. There was all of these like presumptions. And also I realized that she had actually told me before, and I just didn't hear her because I was in my own world. Like, it showed me so much. That's what I mean, is like these little things show us so much if we are open. Like she actually said this stuff to me before, that she wasn't going to be there, and I was in my own little thought process, so I didn't really hear her, wasn't really paying attention to what was going on, and someone was talking to me, I didn't really listen to them. Like there were layers and layers and layers of disruption and weird things that occurred to ensure that I had that experience. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's how I apply them. They tend to get applied after the fact, and then in the next situation, the idea is hopefully that something like that happens, I don't actually get perturbed by it because I've corrected my perception of it. Like, you know, and in that case too, it was tied into all of these things that I thought I was about to do. I was about to stream, and I was about to do these things, like things I really care about and really enjoy. And then suddenly I can't because whatever. And that was just like, whoa! Because I hadn't had something like that in a while. There's not usually a lot of things that jump into my life that stop me from something I'm really excited to do or really invested in. That makes sense. There's not a lot of opportunity to really sway me. Like I've missed flights and just been like, care less. So I must not, maybe that plane's gonna crash. I don't know. Like, I don't know, right? I don't care. So yeah. So I think I'm gonna head off now. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate all of you. Thank you, Sarah, for it was actually you who inspired this whole conversation about healing and balancing and getting in depth into it. So I appreciate everything. Thank you guys so much. You guys have a beautiful night, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Take care.